As President Trump praised Kim Jong-un, he continued his criticism of potential 2020 opponent Joe Biden during a news conference yesterday, where the president was asked about his attacks on the former vice president.
Does it give you pause at all to be appearing to side with a brutal dictator instead of with a fellow American, the former Vice President Joe Biden?
Well, Kim Jong-un made a statement that Joe Biden is a low IQ individual. He probably is, based on his record. I think I agree with him on that.
But in terms of criticism that you're sort of supporting a dictator instead of an American vice president?
Well, when I look at what's been done by our vice president and the president, when I look at the horrible Iran deal that they made, look what happened since I terminated the Iran deal. Look what has happened to Iran. Iran, when I first came into office, was a terror. They were fighting in many locations all over the Middle East. They were behind every single major attack, whether it was Syria, whether it was Yemen, whether it was individual smaller areas, whether it was taking away oil from people. They were involved with everything. Now they're pulling back because they've got serious economic problems. I can tell you that Joe Biden was a disaster. His administration with President Obama, they were basically a disaster when it came to so many things, whether it was economy, whether it was military defense, no matter what it was, they had a lot of problems. So I'm not a fan.
You know, Willie, it bears repeating and reminding our viewers that the Dixie Chicks' career was shattered on country music stations across America. There were Dixie Chick album burnings. There were Dixie Chick bands because they spoke ill of an American president on foreign soil. This is how far we've come. We now have a president who is supported by a lot of those people who probably said, I'm not ever going to listen to Dixie Chicks again, who attacked an American vice president and an American president on foreign soil. That is something you do not do. I remember lashing into Harry Reid for 5 years for attacking George W. Bush when he was in Russia. It's something you don't do.
And not just attacking a former vice president, but doing it as a contrast to the dictator of North Korea. In other words, he's choosing the North Korean dictator over the former vice president of the United States. And Elise, let's remind people, if for President Trump it's not enough that Kim Jong-un starves and murders his people or that he threatens our allies with nuclear weapons, less than 2 years ago, he murdered an American college student. He murdered a young American man, this person that the President of the United States is taking aside over the Vice President of the United States. This is one of those things, again, where we get numb to the president sometimes. We don't have to be surprised, but we ought to be outraged by what we saw over the weekend.
Well, I'm just concerned that every norm in how we behave at home and abroad has just been thrown out the window. And we expect that, oh, the American president can behave like this and it'll just be excused because that's who he is and we're not supposed to be any better than that. And he just gets out on the international stage and is blatantly lying about so many things. Number one, the nuclear deal with Iran, which the Obama administration did not say, oh, you can have nukes like Donald Trump said in that press treatment, but in that press avail. But I just can't imagine being the Japanese and hosting Donald Trump and then just having him essentially stab you in the eye.
Yeah, that's Bob Costa. I'm getting past Elise. That's very violent Mississippi imagery there, stabbing you in the eye. I'm trying to get past that at 6:20. She was from a different part of Mississippi than me. So that's right, Bob. You can smile. So Bob, so the president obviously is focused on 2020. Everything has to do with 2020 race now. He's keyed in on Joe Biden. He even went after him, attacked him on the crime bill. I read that Stuart Stevens last night was suggesting that he's going to start attacking Joe Biden on the crime bill because he knows one of the reasons why he won was African-American turnout was depressed for the first time in 20 years because Trump and the Russians were sending negative messages about Hillary to black voters. Is that something we're going to see over the next year or so, a constant hammering away on issues like the crime bill?
Stepping back and talking to Republican consultants across the country and Democratic consultants, they say that there's a pattern here with these attacks on Vice President Biden and what the president's doing over in Japan. Where is Biden's key political appeal in the industrial Midwest? Where is President Trump at this moment struggling to cut a deal? He's struggling to cut a deal with the Japanese. He has delayed the auto tariffs with the Japanese for 6 months, did the same with the European Union. Still no U.S.-Japanese trade deal. A trade deal with China, he's whispering some positive words, so the markets are up today. Still no deal necessarily on the horizon. This is a White House, based on my conversations with Republican leaders, is worried about trade moving towards the Democrats in 2020, and those voters who flipped to Trump in 2016 may be drifting towards Biden unless they feel the president has that populist edge on trade. So by attacking Vice President Biden, he's really trying to assure his base, even though there's no trade deal, he's still tough on trade.
And what a great point, John Heilman. You know, we've been talking on the show. Certainly, I have, about what a smooth takeoff Joe Biden's had.
Yeah.
He hasn't had a lot of slip-ups, but he has had one. And it may be one of those slip-ups that he only sees the last 6 weeks of the campaign in 30-second spots, and that's where he said we had nothing to worry about with China. So when you have, and Trip Gabriel's article on Youngstown, Ohio, pointed this out beautifully, that when you have Joe Biden saying, hey, we've got nothing to worry about with China, and you have Donald Trump going to war every day with China, obviously white working class voters across the Midwest and a lot of other Americans will say, well, yeah, I'm on Trump's side there.
Right. Well, I think there's no question, Joe, that you're going to see. That's the kind of mistake that that's the one that we've seen so far from Joe Biden of that genre. We will probably see more. Just if you go by history, those are the kinds of. He then went on to explain what he meant by that. America is the most powerful economy in the world. Ultimately, China can't compete with us in terms of innovation, in terms of et cetera, et cetera. By reframing it, there's an explanation, just like when Barack Obama said some things in 2012 about the economy, you didn't build that. There are various things that are taken out of context. I'm sure Joe Biden will be hit with that. I think in the long run, though, the question for a lot of those voters is going to be what has or has not Donald Trump done for them, and so there's a question where the facts on the ground are going to matter more than one or two sound bites taken in and out of context. But I want to go back to the thing you said a second ago, which I think is super important, which is that you've made the point over and over again on the show smartly that Donald Trump is not a political magician and that he won in 2016 by pulling an inside straight. And one important component of pulling that inside straight was depressed Democratic turnout. There's only one path for Donald Trump to win. The path involves winning, as Bob Costa just said, those states in the industrial Midwest, but it also involves depressing Democratic turnout as much as possible in a lot of those same states and in other states. And so this incredible attack on Biden, incredible in the sense that it's fantastical on one level, coming from Donald Trump, the guy who is still, I believe, on record as being in favor of executing the now exonerated Central Park Five, that guy could be attacking Joe Biden from the left on crime, could be attacking him posing himself as more of a champion of criminal justice reform and of the African American community is outrageous on one level, but it's exactly the kind of thing that both Republicans and Russians did in 2016 to try to depress Democratic turnout among African American voters. And we're going to hear a lot of that, I think, from Donald Trump from now all the way through to November of next year.
Yeah, given Trump's history in the 80s and 90s in New York, it's very rich for him to attack Biden on the crime bill. Richard, before we end the block here, I just want to come back really quickly to what happened in Japan over the weekend. If you're Shinzo Abe standing at that podium listening to the President of the United States praise Kim Jong-un, who would like to wipe Japan off the map if he got the chance effectively with a nuclear weapon, what are you thinking? And that goes to a larger question of what are the allies thinking about this President of the United States around the world?
Shinzo Abe has been one of the very few Democratic allies, think about it, the United States, that's kept on good terms with Donald Trump. So he's standing up there and he wants to look like he's defending Japanese security interests against North Korea. He wants his own one-on-one with Kim Jong-un. He's the only major person in the group who hasn't had a one-on-one. Trump's had two. Putin just had one. The South Korean president has had several. China's had several. So he doesn't want to lose that chance to meet with them. And he also doesn't want to get on Trump's wrong side on trade. So what you had was, I won't use the word kabuki, but you get it. This was a leader in a really tough place, also trying to be a gracious host. It was an impossible moment for him, but he has made the strategic decision. He is not going to have a public spat with Trump because he's got larger fish to fry, and he just basically held back.
Well, when asked about the latest tweet by the president invoking Joe Biden and North Korea, Biden's presidential campaign pointed back to a statement issued last week, reading in part, as Vice President Biden said in Philadelphia, Donald Trump embraces dictators and tyrants like Putin and Kim Jong-un while alienating our closest allies. That is antithetical to who we are, and it has to change. And Robert Costa, you know, I guess looking ahead to how Biden continues to handle this politically, but also Trump's team, is there any damage control in terms of sort of foreign policy messaging that needs to be done in light of this latest horrific trip where the president makes a fool of America on the world stage?
The president, on one level, is battling the internationalism of Vice President Biden, that traditional foreign policy perspective that has been articulated by leaders in both parties for decades since the end of World War II. But he's also on another level battling that same perspective inside of his own White House. This trip has underscored how National Security Advisor John Bolton, with his hawkish view on North Korea and so many other fronts, does not always have the standing politically, diplomatically inside of this administration to rein this president in or to put him on a different path. This is a president who goes back to those isolationist, at times, nationalistic instincts, combative instincts. That is driving American foreign policy, even though there are some hawks like Bolton around him.
All right, still ahead on Morning Joe, long before President Trump fell in love with Kim Jong-un, Senator John McCain had some choice words about the incoming commander-in-chief. That is according to Senator Amy Klobuchar, who says the Arizona Republican kept reciting the names of dictators during the president's inauguration. That's fascinating. We'll talk about that ahead.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.